Hello, my name is Troy McCormack, and today my presentation will be on insulin and glucagon, part of the human endocrine system. The human endocrine system is an amazing system within the body. It starts off with glands that are located in key parts of the body that allow for the communication of important chemical signals. The hypothalamus in the brain, along with the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, control a major amount of functions. But there's also the thyroid and the parathyroid glands, as well as the thymus, which is around the heart area. And then we have the heart itself, and adrenal glands on the kidneys, and the digestive tract, which has a whole bunch of glands that allow hormones that allow it to work. And there's also hormones produced in adipose tissue. But what we're going to be focusing on today, and the gonads too, as well. In females, it'd be the ovary. Males, the testes, of course. What we're going to be focusing on today is the pancreas hormones called insulin and glucagon. So this is located here on the pancreas, which is in the digestive area of the glands in the endocrine system. And that's going to be the major portion of what we'll be talking about today. So what is a pancreas? What does it do? And why is it important for our bodies? Well, the pancreas is a part of the endocrine system that lies near the gallbladder and next to the duodenum here in the digestive tract of the abdomen. And inside, it's formed up of these channels, which are called pancreatic ducts. And those allow for beta cells to produce insulin. And here we have a breakdown of what these cells would look like on a smaller level. And so this pancreatic tissue makes up this whole organ, and we're going to be talking mainly about this portion of the body. So because the pancreas plays a number of roles in the body, with the acinar cells being the secretion of digestive enzymes, which would go out towards the digestive tract into the small intestine. There is also, what we're going to be focusing on is the pancreatic hormones, which are produced in the pancreatic islets. And the pancreatic islets here have alpha cells and beta cells. And so we're going to be focusing on the beta cells and the alpha cells in this presentation, and how they produce insulin and glucagon that goes into the splenic artery that would then help for the digestion of glucose within the blood. So the regulation of blood sugar or blood glucose levels by insulin and glucagon is when blood glucose levels increase. Then the insulin in the postprandial phase is released from the pancreatic beta cells. However, when there is not a lot of glucose present, or the blood sugar is low in the blood, or a fasting state of not eating food, glucagon is released from the pancreatic islet cells. So, and those are reduced from the alpha cells. So both of these hormones try to normalize the level of blood glucose. So we can see here kind of how that would happen with the, if let's say blood sugar is high, let's do a blue here. So we have blood sugar that's high, and insulin is released, and it lowers blood glucose here in the muscles and the fat, and then it stimulates then the glucagon secretion. And then when glucagon is released, it goes in and it raises the blood glucose by making glycogen in the liver, and then it stimulates insulin secretion to breakdown of that glycogen and glucose in the blood. So what is glucagon? Well, glucagon is a peptide hormone and is produced by alpha cells of the pancreas. It works to raise the concentration of glucose and fatty acids in the bloodstream, and is considered to be the main catabolic hormone of the body. So here we have a picture of the metabolic regulation of glycogen by glucagon. Glucagon generally elevates the concentration of glucose in the body by promoting gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis. So here we have an example of glucagon here would go into the receptor here, and that would require some energy here in the breakdown of a triphosphate to a diphosphate. And then you keep following the chain, and then you have all these reactions that would occur, and eventually the molecules get broken down, and you are left with glycogen being broken down into glucose here. So one of the largest affected organs by the presence of too much glucose in the system would be that of the heart. And in a scientific study here, the absence of certain fatty acids transporters, namely the CD36 here, protects against a Western type diet related to cardiac dysfunction, and this was done in mice. So pretty much what's happening is they're finding out that you feed mice these certain diets, which is kind of like the diets we would eat here in the West, Western type of diet. Those mice that don't have this the CD36 fatty acid transporter are a little more healthier. So understanding how that process works is very important in ultimately coming to help cardiac patients that are experiencing dysfunction, because of insulin-related deficiencies. So in healthy people, everything's working great. We have insulin and glucagon; they're going great. And here's a good diagram of how all that comes together. We have insulin; it's entering the bloodstream from the pancreas. Glucose enters the bloodstream from the digestive system and liver. That's the basic unit of energy there. And it leaves a healthy balance of glucose and insulating circulating the bloodstream, so everything is able to react with one another. So when the insulin leaves the bloodstream and goes into the cells, it's able to uptake all the proper amount of glucose, which is then used as fuel. That's the whole idea, is use up all this fuel that's there. And that's the whole point of glucose in the system. It creates energy for the cells. So right after eating, it takes about 20 minutes after a meal for insulin to reach its peak level. So the main place that insulin goes into is the muscle and liver cells that will help break it down. In the liver, it'll be broken down to glycogen, and in the muscles, it'll just be used for energy. So this gets us to the next portion of this presentation, which is diabetes. So what happens when insulin's not working? So we know a lot about this because of the disease of diabetes. And there are two forms of this disease. There's type 1 and type 2 diabetes. In type 1, often called juvenile diabetes, there's what's going on is there's just not enough insulin. So there's just, the insulin is diminished. The receptors, it's just, there's not enough. So oftentimes they need that insulin pump to keep the insulin levels at the right levels in order to break down all the glucose. Otherwise, you can have a lot of damage being done from excess glucose in the blood. And now in type 2, which is a more readily occurring type of disease, there's insulin. There's plenty of insulin in the body, but there's a problem of insulin resistance. And so you have the insulin coming in, but it's just not working. there's a defect in the signaling to this GLUT4 molecule here, which is very important in using up the glucose in the body. So, the glucose is just not being broken down because of a problem with this GLUT4 molecule, macromolecule. And this type 2 diabetes, it's also very highly heterogeneous. So there's actually new classification systems that are being provided that, showing that maybe it's not the GLUT4, maybe there's something else going on with the with the with the insulin resistance or the insulin's insufficiencies. So understanding exactly how particular diabetes are affecting a particular patient, it gives a better tool belt, I guess, to deal with the problem of diabetes. So here's kind of the current method of how diabetes is being treated. Um, they have to prick their finger and check their blood sugar levels. If there's hyper, meaning fast or too much, um, then that's a problem. And then insulin needs to be administered. Um, Insulin also, other than making, it inhibits the glycan glycogenolysis, and so glucose is removed from the blood and stored as glycogen in the liver. It also inhibits gluconeogenesis, which means that free glycerol molecules and amino acids are not converted to glucose in the ER. And then what this ultimately does when the insulin is released is the blood glucose concentration will decrease. And so this is the start of homeostasis. So this is where you want to be, the 90 milligrams of glucose per deciliter. Whereas in hypoglycemia, low blood glucose, we have, say it's around the 50 mark, um, the glucagon is released, and the alpha cells of the pancreas release the glucagon. Um, and what it does is it inhibits body cells from taking up glucose from the blood and utilizing it in cellular respiration. It stimulates glycogenolysis, which is the glycogen in the liver is broken down into glucose and released into the blood. And it stimulates gluconeogenesis, where it's pretty much the opposite of insulin. So insulin and glucagon are opposites of each other. One does one thing, the other does the other. Insulin decreases blood sugar, glucagon increases blood sugar. So one could say that, type 2 diabetes is a problem with being not sensitive enough to insulin. So they found that they did kind of a weird study here, and it has to do with cold acclimations. And so what they found was that if they put somebody in a cold environment for 10 days, it had very, very marked positive effects on whole body and skeletal muscle insulin sensitivity, which is what really you want to kind of get rid of the diabetic effects. And they provide a new avenue to treat and improve the metabolic health of patients. And what's going on here is that they're finding that there's this other type of fat called brown fat, and it's a burner and not a store of fats, whereas the white fats or the beige fats or whatever you want to call it is kind of a fat store. So, um, you know, finding out that keeping a person cold kind of like increases the use of insulin, and the instance of insulin being able to digest the um, uh, glucose in the blood, and so rather than it just being stored and creating more adipose tissue that can cause visceral fat and pressure on the pancreas, which can shut down those ducts and really cause more diabetes, it's burning it off. So this is kind of good news for those who suffer from it. Just be cold. Someone says it's getting hot this summer. Well, turn down your AC and take a cold shower and really get those the brown fats portions in your body working. Thank you so much. Here are my references. Here's a little bit more of my references. Have a good day.